There are actors who take roles, and there are actors who carry something larger than themselves onto screen, who become, over the course of a career, a mirror for an entire people. The first time I met Gary Farmer on screen, I couldn't take my eyes off of him. He was playing Nobody, a fictional Native American spirit guide in Jim Jarmusch's 1995 acid western film Dead Man, helping Johnny Depp navigate the afterlife. And there was something about him I had never seen before, something completely magnetic about him. I recognized him from Powwow Highway, like seeing someone so familiar. He had our community's particular humor reflected back in his facial expressions and his mannerisms with love and accuracy. And then smoke signals came along, and I was simply not prepared for what it felt like to see us, to really see us on screen. Full human beings with complicated fathers and families and heartache and laughter and jokes and survival. Gary carries all of that. For those of us who grew up Native, Gary didn't just play characters, he played our fathers, our uncles, our grief, our humor, our dignity. He does it with such ceremony, such truth, that it comes straight through the screen and lands somewhere deep. He taught me that it was okay to have a father like mine. He gave me pride in our shared struggles. He made me laugh because he knows the heart of our community. We didn't have anyone like him, and then we had him, the one and only. Gary Farmer is from Cayuga Nation. He's Wolf Clan of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. He grew up in Buffalo, New York, studied photography and film at Syracuse University and Ryerson Polytechnic, and began his career in community theater in 1976, before there were any roadmaps for what an Indigenous actor could become. His body of work spans 50 years, Independent Spirit Award nominations for Powwow Highway, Dead Man, and Smoke Signals, roles alongside Marlon Brando, Robert De Niro, and Edward Norton, and most recently, Uncle Brownie on the Emmy-nominated Reservation Dogs. It was a performance so precisely human that a whole new generation of us claimed him as our own. But Gary has always understood that representation without infrastructure means very little. When there was no platform for Indigenous voices in media, he built one, founding the Aboriginal Voices Radio Network, one of the first urban Indigenous radio networks in Canada. He co-founded the Santa Fe International Film Festival and created its annual Indigenous film program, which he continues to curate. He has spent his entire career insisting that Native people tell their own stories in their own words with full creative authority. Gary and I are neighbors in Santa Fe. We have worked together, sat together, and over the years, I have come to know something of the man behind the career: his humility, his genuine investment in Native youth, his tenderness. He leads Gary Farmer and the Troublemakers, his blues band. He began in community theater and has never lost that foundation. He will tell you that acting is ceremony, and looking at 50 years of his work, it truly is ceremony. Please join me in welcoming Gary Farmer.
Yeah. Scano, swaguego. Is there peace in your heart? Negaso hayan twas. My name is He Who Plants. When Israel Watney. It's a beautiful sunny day today. Nawagoa, squaidiso. Thank you so much, Creator. For generations, we as Haudenosaunee, Iroquois Confederacy, and the teachings of the great law brought to my people by a prophet we referred to as the peacemaker. We know his name and our language, but we were instructed not to mention his name until we go deep into the forest and call him by his name. That's when it's time for his return. It's obviously near. But there is or was a university named after the peacemaker just north of this location, titled DQ University. That great law still governs the Ongohoe, the human beings, and at the time, and to a large degree, still governs our people, along with the federal impact or the paternal government forced upon us in 1923 by Canada. Our own oral history and story tells of how the peacemaker, the story goes that there was at least 7 attempts on the peacemaker's life. Still, he managed to clear the snakes from the evil one's hair and fix the 7 crooks from his body in order to form the great peace of these warring tribes, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, and Cayuga, and formed our Haudenosaunee Confederacy based on the great law, approximately a 9-day recitation currently. The original Confederacy formed around the 11th century with the original 5 nations, the Iroquois Confederacy. Recently, I heard them acknowledge the peacemaker is the best psychoanalyst ever to cure Taradaho of his violent and merciless ways. And still today in our contemporary longhouse ceremonials, Taradaho will always be the first to speak. The Tuscaroras joined the Confederacy in 1712 after the 10 Years' War against the Tuscarora in the Carolinas by George Washington and the U.S. forces. That same route the Tuscaroras took to us early in the 1700s to join our Confederacy later became the escape route for the blacks enslaved by the South, famously titled the Underground Railroad. The relationship between our indigenous people and the blacks enslaved from Africa and elsewhere around the world is still a history that has not really been explored historically. The American Revolution in 1776 interrupted the 6 nations from becoming 9 nations, as the Tutelos, the Wyandots, and the Lenni Lenape, or Delaware, were about to join the Confederacy at that time. By that time, around the War of 1812, our once great Confederacy was split. Half followed Joseph Brant and sided with the British forces and eventually created Canada, and half sided with the Americans. It was the first time in modern history that we fought on different sides for at least 1,000 years. Ben Franklin used our great League of Peace as the foundation of American democracy. We have been referred to historically as the people of government. Franklin took most of our concepts of governments, except that our 50 chiefs, our leadership was selected by our 50 clan mothers for life. Our 6 nations clan mothers had a profound impact on the lifetime appointment of our 50 leaders. Not for 2 or 4-year terms, but lifetime appointments. Then and only then can you have a vision to make decisions based on 7 generations forward or 200 years. That lack of vision for future generations that operates our current federal administration makes decisions based on their 2 or 4-year terms. It makes it all about wealth extraction within their term of office. Generally, we are suffering from the lack of vision our Haudenosaunee women had within and held within our ancient society. American society has never been able to overcome the paternal view that leads the nation. I often wonder in my senior years what kind of world we could have lived in if the nation builders of the American empire would have accepted indigenous people as equals. We shared our foods, medicines, and methodologies to survive in the northeastern, often harsh climate. Our efforts to respect the balance and power of our natural world instead of manipulating our mineral resources for profit and maintaining a lifestyle that is obviously unsustainable after just 250 years of the American Empire. Our Haudenosaunee culture and ceremonial life is based on orations, spoken word, song, and dance. Our inert knowledge of our worldview has sustained us still today. We survived the assimilation policies carried out against us. We've succeeded as nations of Indigenous people despite the ignorance of our place in the American and Canadian history. My English name is Gary Farmer. I've lived my life and career as an actor in theater, on radio, TV, and feature films for 50 years. My experience as members of my community, a young performing artist, and with my outspoken nature, led me to conjure our Indigenous structures of communications in the early 90s of the last century. I felt we had to participate to save our languages and way of life. With 60% of my community facing diabetic condition, we had to do something to help our people understand and combat the crisis, but also to mark our place in the 500-channel universe with our stories. My initial interest was low-power FM radio to our near 1,200 communities in the US and Canada, not to mention the urban communities with significant Indigenous populations. I learned and believed that low-power FM radio was the answer to help communicate to our people, share stories and news that would be relative to our survival as Indian nations. It's a spoken word medium, just like our ceremonial ways. As I communicate my history of my people this morning, you, my audience, you created images of my story in your own imaginations. Most Indigenous cultures in North America are based on oral cultural understanding. Our ceremonies are still conducted today from centuries of practice. Our oral histories and understanding has been passed down for thousands of years. Our Indigenous language are the true study of the natural world in explicit language to describe our world around us in astounding detail. Our Indigenous language are the true study of nature based on observation over centuries of time. Those languages tell us how to survive on Mother Earth forever. There is no end to our story for Indigenous people, as there is in Christian belief, for instance, in the final chapter, Revelations. I learned early in life that TV is the modern means of assimilation to a consumer reality. I witnessed it in real time, executed in Northern Ontario in 1977. I was at the time when Canada split the country with an imaginary line dividing north from south. It was called the Hummelin Line. Back then, the Canadian government eventually determined that Indigenous people north of that line would be able to maintain their languages and cultural ways, so we'll give you access to radio and television signals to do so. They expected Indigenous people south of that line to simply be absorbed into Canadian society. All of my Haudenosaunee relatives and reserves in Canada were south of that line. So they did nothing to help us preserve our languages and cultural traditions with radio and television access. Meanwhile, in northern Canada, along with the idealism to preserve and nurture Indigenous languages and cultural practices, but that was after northern Indigenous people fought for access to signals to promote their way of life and not just be exposed to programs like All in the Family. They, for the first time in their lives, would be exposed to commercial television, at first exclusively. At the time, I was working in Sioux Lookout, Ontario, developing a musical theatrical piece to tour to isolated fly-in Native communities, mostly Oji-Cree, Cree, and eventually Inuit first language speakers, now known as Nunavut, with the NDWT Theater Company, an acronym for Ne'er-Do-Well Thespians, based out of Toronto. I was on my first equity job. Actors Equity is the professional stage actors union, flying to Native communities in northern Canada at the time in a single Otter airplane piloted by an Indian fellow was simply amazing, especially when all we had was a compass and a map. No radar or any other sophisticated means of air travel. We had to be constantly aware of whiteout conditions. When visibility became impossible in midwinter, we'd have to lower altitude and look at our map to recognize what lake we were near to determine our location, then fly low enough to see if there was any drifting snow as we flew with skis for landing gear, often landing on frozen lakes and sliding sideways. The beauty of northern Canada at that time, midwinter, was an eye-opening experience for a young urban Indian growing up with Italians, Irish, and Polish second-generation immigrants in Buffalo, New York. What I witnessed at that time was the impact of traditional Indigenous peoples' exposure to consumer television. Those northern air flights to travel down to Sioux Lookout were within weeks of commercial television, and people wanted the McDonald's hamburgers and would fly down to Sioux Lookout to get them and their Nike sneakers. And that expense of those flights south were not cheap. What I learned at that time is Canadian colonists don't need the church anymore to convert Indigenous people worldwide to Christian culture. All they need is consumer television. What was it they wanted in Northern Ontario? Now referred to as the Ring of Fire. Chromium. What's chromium? Chromium is used to make stainless steel to build the upcoming economies of China, Argentina, and India. Chromium is widely used in modern weapons manufacturing. The Ring of Fire is a vast mineral-rich region in northern Ontario's James Bay lowlands, known for massive deposits of chromite, nickel, copper, and other critical minerals, making it a major economic and strategic asset for the province of Ontario, named for its crescent shape in the Johnny Cash song. The area is considered remote, with development focused on building infrastructure, particularly all-seasons roads, to unlock its potential while navigating environmental concerns and engaging with local First Nations communities. This is the largest swath of chromium in the world outside of South Africa. One can't help but realize why our current administration wants Canada to be our 51st state. You see, television puts our minds into beta, which simply means it's a one-way street. You simply become a receiver of information. It's the modern brainwasher. You watch 5 hours of TV a day, you are watching 80,000 commercials a year, which have an impact on your buying habits. It's obvious today with the American population living primarily a relatively toxic food system designed to keep us in health care for the rest of our lives. I can't help think that it's about population control. Concepts of chemical farming has been destroying American health for almost a century and forced upon Central and South America since the turn of the century. The manipulation and control in Bill Clinton's reign of power, unaptly named Free Trade Agreement, which stimulated the Indigenous-led Zapatista movement some years back. Chemical farming has infecting Indigenous people's lands and their ability to crop food, taking the rights to crop their own food, especially chemical farming techniques. Indigenous nations in North, Central, and South America, primary food is corn. The U.S. Free Trade Agreement was impacting local indigenous farmers from utilizing the common lands to grow food. The Zapatista movement was simply fighting their right to crop food. Their fears of starvation was real. You plant one seed and you can expect potentially 270 seeds. Classically, an indigenous crop nurtured from a grass by the Mayan. It changed the economy of the world at the time. The Europeans could only manage oats or barley. You plant one seed, you get 6 or 8. The cropping of corn nurtured and launched a brand new economy. Corn is the only food required human interaction to foster growth. They did not crop and could not sustain a trip across the ocean to enslave Africans until our indigenous croppage of corn. The first 13 of my years of my career was primarily in the development of new plays of Indigenous writers, primarily in Canada and around in 1975, and I'm still active today in that level. Given the opportunity, classically the struggling actor, financially not well, but the love of bringing our stories to life on stage is where I matured, not only as the actor, but realizing our strengths as Indigenous people and our relationship and respect for the land. You could say that my work in the theater for the first 13 years of my career exposed me to the written word, to literature from around the world in my studies. I was gaining so much knowledge by just studying and performing the work to live audiences. My objective for being an actor was to save the world from destroying itself, to help my own people with stories that move them to grow and expand their understanding of their own histories and consider ways for positive change. I got 23 seconds left, and I just want to thank you all for all your participation left. It's been a beautiful life. Ha ha ha.